Welcome back into a weekend edition of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out their website, fullpresscoverage.com, for this and other great podcasts and articles. And make sure you check out my Twitter as well as Sap's Twitter, because we tweet cool things and tweet out the links to all the shows, make it nice and easy for you. At John Sapp 25, JOHNSAP 25, or at Jet Striar, JETSTRIAR. Also, the YouTube is youtube.com/Jet Striar, spelled the same way. Trying to make things as easy as possible for everybody. Sapp, what is not easy is winning a championship, whether it be in the NFL or the NBA or any professional sports league. But our friend Kendrick Perkins likes to make, bombastic statements to get people talking. And the other week, he had an interesting one talking about the NFL versus the NBA and what's more difficult to win a title in. He said that it's the NBA, and I'm sure a lot of people disagree. Our friend John Serenides probably went apoplectic. And I was curious, Sap, what do you think? Is it harder to win a Larry O'Brien trophy or a Lombardi trophy?
Well, first of all, we've got to make Kendrick Perkins our executive producer. He gives us so many great ideas to talk about here on the podcast, right? I think it's more difficult to win a Lombardi trophy because it's one and done. So you can't slip up. You get to the conference championship and you don't play your best game, you're out. Whereas in basketball, it's a best of 7. You have 4 series. Look at the Lakers last year. They lost game 1 to Portland, came back, won 4 straight. They lost game 1 to Houston, came back, won 4 straight. Then they took care of business against Denver in Miami. They won the title. Now, obviously, basketball is different than football. Football's once a week. Basketball's regular season is 5 times longer than the NFL season. So obviously the playoffs are going to be different. It is difficult to win a Lombardi trophy because it is that one and done, and then you've got different styles that you're playing against, and you do this in basketball as well, but you can't just ease into a football game. You've got to be prepared from the get-go, whereas in basketball, and I think we've seen this a lot with even LeBron James throughout his career, game 1 is kind of a feeling out process, and then he gets hold of what he needs to do by game 2, and he takes care of business. In football, you really don't have that time. Now, Bill Belichick of the Patriots, he's been able to do that within a game, which is pretty fascinating. I don't think he planned to get down 28-3 to the Falcons in the Super Bowl, but
no, he planned it.
Yeah, it was made it that much more interesting. Get down by 25 and then win in overtime. I think it's more difficult though to win an NFL championship, and I'll look at it this way: in the NBA, you've got Bill Russell won 11 championships, Jordan and Kareem won 6, Magic and Kobe won 5. Now LeBron's won 4. Bird won 3. In the NFL, there's Tom Brady with 7. And then among quarterbacks, the next guy is Montana with 4, Bradshaw with 4, and Aikman with 3. So that kind of proves that it's more difficult to win in the NFL because you don't have those repeat champions. You just can't overwhelm a team back-to-back years like you can in basketball. Basketball, we see three-peats more regularly now than we did, 40 years ago. It was unheard of in the 70s for even back-to-back champions. And then, of course, Jordan had 2 three-peats. We know Shaq and Kobe had a three-peat. Golden State never had a three-peat, but they came pretty damn close to doing it. So I think it's more difficult to win in the NFL because it's a one-off. You have a bad day, you're done with. That's why I think it's tougher to win a tough tennis tournament than, say, a golf tournament, because a golf tournament, you go out on Thursday, you're 4 over par. You have 3 more days to correct your ills. In tennis, you suck in the second round and get beat, you're done. You go home. So I would equate it to those sports, individual sports as opposed to team sports. I would vote that it's more difficult to win an NFL championship than an NBA championship. And the only slight difference is if you're the 1 seed in football, you only have to win 2 games to get to the Super Bowl, then win the Super Bowl. Whereas in basketball, you got to win 4 series, best of 7. So that's a little bit more difficult because there's an extra layer. But Tom Brady won 4 playoff games to win his Super Bowl, with the first 3 being on the road. And of course, the 4th one, the Super Bowl, being played at his home stadium. So I would say that more difficult to win that Lombardi trophy.
Yeah, I agree with you on the part that the playoff format makes it a little bit more difficult because you're right in that there's obviously it's a one-off. So if you have a bad game, you're done. You don't get a second chance. And in a 7-game series, you come back to fight another day. The 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 difference, though, I think, and why I might lean a little bit towards the NBA is if you don't have, so try to stick with me here because I'm not sure I'm gonna phrase this correctly at all. If you don't have that star player
Mhm.
in the NBA, it becomes virtually impossible.
Right.
Football, you can build a good enough team where you don't have to. Traditional knowledge is you need to have a great quarterback to win the Super Bowl, and that often is true. But there's a lot more outliers in the NFL of not having that and winning a
Mhm.
title than there are in the NBA of not
Right.
having that top 5 player and winning a championship. So maybe I want to say, Sap, it's harder to build a championship winning basketball team
Mhm.
than it is to build a championship winning football team. You obviously having the great quarterback puts you in a really good position. Everything that if you have that set, you're in great shape. Same with in the NBA. If you have that top 5 player, you're pretty much always in contention, or you can build around trying to be in contention. If you have a top 2 player, you're really always in contention for a title. And so if you are one of the 28 teams that doesn't have that in the NBA, it becomes nearly impossible to win a title. History has shown that if you don't have one of those very, very, very top guys, you're not winning. So maybe it's harder. The road is harder because of the one-off nature of football to win a Lombardi trophy. But the method of being a team that's viable for a championship in the NBA is hard. I think it's very, very difficult to take a team from nothing and build them into a championship contender in the NBA. In the NFL, I do think you can do it easier.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the Patriots, for example. Their first Super Bowl, they were a double-digit underdog to the greatest show on turf, the St. Louis Rams. The Rams had Kurt Warner, who was the league MVP, and the Patriots had some second-year quarterback named Tom Brady, and they were able to win through a team effort. Their defense was outstanding, their special teams throughout that run, and they were able to secure a championship. Then you fast forward 7 years, and the Patriots are playing the Giants in the Super Bowl. Patriots are undefeated, looking for perfection. Run up against the Giants team led by Eli Manning, who is a borderline Hall of Famer because he won 2 Super Bowls. If you take those off of his resume, he's not a Hall of Famer. But of course, that's a very big if. But the Giants weren't as talented as the Patriots, but they matched up with them and they were able to win. So I can see your point. You don't
Or look at
see
the
upsets.
Eagles when they
Yeah,
won
the
the
Eagles.
Super Bowl.
I thought the Eagles had a better roster than the Patriots that year. I really did. I mean, going into that game, I was not surprised that the Eagles ended up winning. I thought they were better on both the offensive and defensive lines.
But
Obviously,
they
the Patriots.
lacked that star quarterback,
Oh,
Sap,
sure,
that
yeah, yeah.
like I'm saying, like you want it in the NFL. In the NBA, you need the star player, period. You need it. You cannot win a title without a high
Outside of
level
the
superstar player.
outside of the '04 Pistons, yeah, you're right. And I mean, would you qualify the Mavericks winning in 2011? I mean, Dirk
Dirk
was
won a league MVP.
right, but 3 or 4 years before that, I don't think he was a top 5 player anymore. But he was able to do what he did in that
Yeah,
series.
I
I
guess you
always
could
look at
qualify
his.
them. So we're talking about 2 in the past,
Yeah,
40 years.
yeah. It's generally been recently it's been LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. Before that it was Kobe and Shaq and Michael and his guys. So yeah, I mean, you do need that great player, but I think that makes it, in a sense, when you look at the true contenders, that it's much smaller in the NBA than in the NFL. Going into this postseason, we probably agree there's only 5 teams that can win the championship:
Yep.
Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Brooklyn from the East, the Lakers, and the Clippers from the West. Anyone else would be a giant surprise. The NFL tends to be a little bit deeper. You'll see. Look, Tampa Bay had Tom Brady last year, so they're not a dark horse, but they did come out of the wild card round. They didn't even win their own division. They had to win 3 road playoff games.
The Giants are a perfect example that you just
Giants
mentioned,
have
Seth.
done it.
Once
When
you're
Aaron
in,
Rodgers,
if you're in the
Aaron
playoffs in the
Rodgers won
NFL, you have
Super
a
Bowl
puncher's
was won as
chance.
a wild card team. Yeah, I mean, the year that Rodgers won the Super Bowl, the Packers were the 6th seed. They had to
No
win 3 road
puncher's
games to
chance in
get
the
there.
NBA, Sap.
No, that the lowest seeded team to ever win an NBA championship was the Houston Rockets as the 6th seed in 1995, and they happened to be the defending champions who added Clyde Drexler at the end of the year. So I don't think we were shocked when Houston won the championship in 1995. So yeah, no, right now, whoever the 6 seeds are, I mean, the Lakers could equal that or maybe even surpass it if they're the 7th seed, but that's the Lakers with LeBron James.
Right. It's
That's
a
like,
little bit of a different situation.
it's similar to Brady with Tampa. Okay, we're not betting against this guy.
Right. They're not a dark horse. They're not, they're in this position because of injuries, not because
Right.
of, lack of, they didn't have a good season. It's mostly because
Yep.
they missed their 2 big guys. So I look at it as it's really hard to build an NBA team ground up without that superstar and compete for a championship. And because of the one-off nature of football, you see teams that have been in the Super Bowl, and obviously if you're in the Super Bowl, you have a chance to win the whole thing. You just have one game where you have to do it. And you look at some of the teams that have been in it and, won, like the Eagles, that, you look at them, you go, man, who was their quarterback? Nick Foles? They won the Super Bowl. Or you look at like teams that were in the Super Bowl and didn't quite win. The Rams, when the Patriots beat them 13-3, they quarterback was Jared Goff, not particularly impressive. They had a good offense, solid defense, but it's not like you look at them as like, oh my God, they had this star and this unbelievable.
They led
player.
the league in scoring that year at 13-3.
And then they put up 3 in the Super Bowl.
They put up 3 in the Super Bowl, which to this day, I remember watching that Super Bowl going, when is this game going to start? Because it didn't even feel like it ever got going, and then it was over. I mean, Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl, but he had an elite defense. Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl, elite defense. Brad Johnson, Super Bowl, elite defense. So you can do it that way as well. There's probably more ways to win a Super Bowl than an NBA championship. You're right. The NBA champions tend to have one of the top 2 or 3 players in the league. And look, Toronto was a surprise a couple of years ago, but we all agree Kawhi Leonard's a top 5 player when healthy and engaged. And also in that particular season, that was more about Golden State being hurt. I mean, if Curry, Durant, and Klay Thompson are all healthy, they three-peat. And back to Dallas winning in 2011, it pains me to say this. This was more about LeBron losing that series than the Mavericks winning it. If LeBron played the way LeBron normally plays, Miami wins that series in 5 or 6 games. They were better. He choked in that series. I'll be the first to admit that. Only time he's played poorly in an NBA Finals was that particular year. So, yeah, I could see where you're going there. And again, generally the team with the best player wins, right? I mean, that's the way it works in the NBA. In fact, that's what probably we'll do when we do our playoff preview. You go, okay, this team has this guy. They're better than the other team because their best player is not as good.
If you have LeBron, it's not easy to make the finals, but you're the expectation, and you're probably going to get there. So, if you have one of those top players, I think it's easier than in the NFL, which is other than Tom Brady, which is just a complete anomaly that, he was there every other year of his career. Aaron Rodgers has only been to 1 Super Bowl. I mean, he's had multiple years where most people considered him the best player in football. So
including
just having that guy in football, doesn't mean it. So I think when you're talking about the very top level players in the NBA, if you have one of them, it's easier to win a title. In the NFL, if you have one of them, not so easy. But if you're talking about the rest of it, I think it's easier to take a team that the year before was kind of crap in the NFL and then possibly compete for a Super Bowl. In the NBA, it's borderline impossible to do that.
Yeah, because you'd look at like the Phoenix Suns, who didn't even make the playoffs last year. They were strong in the bubble. They won all 8 games before the playoffs, but they still didn't qualify for the playoffs. But then they added Chris Paul and a couple other players stepped up, and now they've had a fantastic year. You don't see that very often.
No, and they're not going to make the finals anyways.
No, they're probably losing the first round if they play the Lakers. I mean, I think everybody would expect them to lose in that first round matchup. So, yeah, no, I get your point. I think it's difficult to win both, obviously. I mean, Brady's made it look easier than it should be.
Yeah, when you
go to a brand new team, you really do. It's like people say, well, you don't need a first round quarterback to win the Super Bowl. Well, 7 times a guy drafted in the 6th round won the damn Super Bowl. Let's just take him and put him to the side. Generally, a first round quarterback is the guy that wins the Super Bowl. But
it's almost like in the NBA, you have to take Jordan and LeBron out because they got there every year.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are freaks. They're just, and they didn't necessarily need a lot of help to get there.
Yeah, I mean, LeBron, if they make the finals this year, what's that? How many finals is that for him? 9?
Be 10, he's made 10 already. That'd be his 11th.
That's insane. I mean,
It
that's
is.
insane.
Yeah, and he's the last 9 years he was healthy, he made the finals. The only year he didn't make it, he was hurt 2 years ago with the Lakers.
Hurt.
When LeBron's healthy, he makes the finals.
Yeah, it's bonkers. That's
Yeah.
so the guys who are freaks, you can sort of take out of the
Take them out of
argument.
the equation. It's like
Right.
any kind of study you do, like you take out the top and the bottom,
Right.
and to throw them out, so now you get a better feel of what everything's about. Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady should never be part of these discussions or equations because he's a one-off.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the. It's not even worth talking about because it's
Right.
incredible. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. Everything that we've known and grown up with as sports fans our whole lives, Brady and LeBron have basically shattered that. Like,
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be able to do this. Everything is designed for teams to not be able to do this, or players
At
to not
that
be able to
age too, right? Because Brady's going to play this upcoming year at 44. LeBron's 36, and they go to new teams and win. Like,
Yeah, no,
Brady
you're
goes
not
to
supposed to
Tampa
do
and
it.
wins. Yeah, they're the outliers. So, like, let's look at the other discussions. But it's a fascinating discussion. And again, we give credit to Kendrick Perkins, our executive producer.
Yeah, so talking about some of these great players in the NBA, Sap, and you saw this I think on Twitter. Someone was asking if you could see anybody go one-on-one in basketball, which is the ultimate sort of playground thing.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the ideal matchup or the best matchup to watch? Am I getting that right, Sap? Is that how it was framed?
Yeah, what would be the best one-on-one matchup? This was put out by Sean Salisbury, the former quarterback who now does sports talk radio in Houston. We used to have him on NBC Sports radio in Boston 7-8 years ago when we were working there. Really good analyst. Was a great analyst with ESPN. They didn't renew his contract, and now he's doing sports talk in Houston. I broke it down into 3 categories. One would be the current great players. The second one would be the all-time great players. And then the third one would be kind of one out of left field that might be wildly entertaining with guys that aren't Hall of Famers. Of the current stars, Steph Curry against Kyrie Irving, I think, would be the most fascinating one-on-one matchup. You would think for me to answer that with LeBron James against Kevin Durant, but they're so big and so overwhelming that I don't know how fun that would be to watch. Plus, you're taking away LeBron's best skill, which is passing. I don't know. LeBron playing one-on-one, I'm sure would beat everyone, but taking away his best skill. And Durant would be nearly impossible because if he felt like he could go out to 40 feet and start hitting bombs. Now, also, how we're going to do this is make and take, or is it, you score, I get the ball back.
No, you keep
it.
Score,
keep it. You're going to see a lot of 11-0 games with some of the skill level of these guys. Kyrie Irving and Steph Curry would lead you to that. And again, I've said this a million times. If I could be one NBA player on the playground, it would be Kyrie Irving. 6'2", you're warming up. You say, wow, this guy's really skilled. And then he goes out there and dominates like crazy. I mean, if you show up to the playground as LeBron James, 6'9", 260, and you're warming up and you're doing, dunks off of misses off the backboard, people are going to look and go, we really should be playing with this guy. It's a little bit scary. And Steph Curry's the greatest shooter ever. So I said Curry and Kyrie Irving, I think, would be fantastic to watch because I think Kyrie Irving is the most skilled guy in the league. If everybody was the same size, he might be the best offensive player. If everybody was 6'2", he'd be the best player in the league in terms of offense. That's how much respect I have for him, and Steph's the greatest shooter ever. So that would be that one-on-one matchup of, 2 contemporary great players.
Yeah, and similarly, I'd like to see Curry and Damian Lillard.
Yeah,
because I'd like to see them sort of bomb away. That's what we talk about is the guys who have probably the most range in the NBA. And I don't think either one in a one-on game would be particularly interested in playing defense. So it would kind of, be who can hit the most long-distance threes with somebody not in their face. So I feel like that would be fun. They're similar size. You don't want to see a one-on-one game with one guy who's, towering over the other guys. That's not right. That's not fun. I do think Taco versus Boban would be an entertaining one-on-one matchup. I'd like to see that just for the novelty of it. An old-fashioned paint duel.
That'd be great.
2 gigantic dudes. I'm trying to think because here's the thing. Great offense always beats great defense in the NBA. So, I wouldn't want to pick, whoever you think is the best wing defender, Marcus Smart, Patrick
Leonard.
Beverly, Kawhi Leonard, Ben Simmons, pick one of those guys. If they play Kevin Durant still would torch them. You could be, they're fabulous defenders. They're amazing at it, but great offense is going to beat great defense every time in the NBA. That's just how it goes.
What would be an interesting matchup would be James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. Harden is an unstoppable offensive force, and Kawhi is a great defender.
Throws.
That's the thing. There's going to be no free throws, although maybe you have to if someone starts hacking people. My outside of the box one would be this: Michael Porter Jr. against Kyle Kuzma. Because Michael Porter Jr. right now is playing at a very high level. Since April 1st, he's averaging 25 a game for Denver. He's shooting 42% from
one
3.
One of those guys is good.
Well, Michael Porter Jr., you said it, out of his draft class, he may turn out to be the 3rd best player in that draft class, or maybe the 25th best player in that draft class. I don't know of an NBA player that has a wider variance between his ceiling and his floor, more so than Michael Porter Jr. That's why if they had Jamal Murray healthy, Denver would be a real contender to go with Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and, of course, the presumptive MVP, Nikola Jokic. Kuzma at times has games where he looks really good. But the only problem with Kyle Kuzma is since he's come in the league, he's gotten worse every year. He's supposed to get better as you play more, and it's just gotten worse for him every year with the Lakers. But he does have capable moments. And I know last year in the playoff, I thought the two of them were going to just actually have a fist fight. Because they probably both think they're better than they are. Although Michael Porter Jr., I think, could be an all-star in this league. He's got that type of talent. He's got Jason Tatum type ability, right? 6'10", can put it on the floor, can shoot from 3. He's a nightmare of a matchup being that big and that long and athletic. But that would be kind of an outside-the-box one, would be Kuzma against Michael Porter Jr. All-time best one-on-one. I don't know how you could disagree with this. It would be Kobe and Michael Jordan. That would be two sociopaths who would not give up. They would both play hellacious defense on each other. They would play forever. It'd be a best of 99 because neither one's going to give in. I think that would be the best all-time matchup because they're the right size too, both 6'6". You don't want to see Wilt and Kareem. That would get kind of boring after a while, or whoever. Give me Kobe against Michael Jordan one-on-one. That would be the ultimate one-on-one matchup.
Yeah, the one everybody would want to see would be Jordan LeBron. I'm not.
Would not be a good matchup.
LeBron's too strong, I would imagine.
Yeah, again, you're taking away his best skill, which is passing. But who's stopping?
If he just
LeBron
wants to post them up,
he's just too big. Yeah, but Skip Bayless claims if that happened that Jordan would steal his heart, but of course Skip doesn't have
Jordan's
much good
faster
to say about
than is probably a little bit faster. Just because LeBron's carrying more weight. I'm not saying LeBron's not crazy fast for his size, but you typically, if your guy is a lot stronger than somebody else in one-on-one, they're just going to back him down and score.
He's so big.
So
LeBron could play Karl Malone in terms of size.
True.
He could play Karl Malone one-on-one and not have to back down from him. Like Bird would be fascinating in a one-on-one matchup because he had every shot in the book. How about Bird Durant? That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Because
Bird Magic I think would be fun too.
Yeah, Magic's another guy that the one-on-one thing doesn't really fit into his game.
You don't want to take away the passing from somebody.
Yeah, even more so than LeBron, because LeBron's a better scorer than Magic, right? Averaged 8 points per game more in his career. But Jordan Kobe to me would be the ultimate, holy crap, this is going to be war.
Yeah, it would be really fun. Another one I would want to see, Sap, in terms of the contemporary players right now, I think it would be fun to see Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum go up against each other.
Yeah.
Just to see how I like, when teammates, to see how, teammates
that's true.
Would do against
That's a good point.
I think that's entertaining.
Go back in the day, Scottie Pippen against Jordan, because Pippen was probably the only guy in the league that could remotely come close to containing Jordan, other than Gary Payton in games 4, 5, and 6 of the 1996 finals.
Not according to Jordan. He thinks that's laughable.
He laughed at that on his iPad during the Last Dance. But it's a fun endeavor, and it's really the only sport you can do this for. We have a passing contest between Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers would kick his ass in that. And a pure skills contest.
Yeah, I don't think that bothers Tom Brady one bit.
No, he's dink and dunk his way to another Super Bowl.
Sap, so before we get out of here, another guy who'd probably be fun in these one-on-ones, Jerry West. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that Jeannie Buss was on the All the Smoke podcast with I think it's Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson, I believe, do that podcast. And so Jeannie Buss, owner of the Lakers, daughter of the late Dr. Jerry Buss, she was asked, who are the 5 best or most important Lakers of all time? And she had some interesting omissions. Her list was Kobe.
Agree.
Kareem.
Agree.
Magic.
Agree.
Phil Jackson, who she dated.
No, he was a coach.
And LeBron James.
Love LeBron, favorite player of all time. He's been with the Lakers for 3 years. Now, see, when people say this, like, who's the greatest Laker of all time? If we're going to say in terms of the history of the sport, technically it's LeBron. I think he's the greatest player in league history, so that would make him the greatest Laker. But, I think of LeBron more as a Cavalier, even right now, more of a member of the Miami Heat than the Lakers.
Patrick Ewing's the greatest Orlando Magic player of
exactly.
all time, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's like Kevin Garnett. I think of him. I know he won a championship here and he was fantastic, but the bulk of his career was with the Timberwolves. That's like when people say who's the 5th greatest Celtic of all time, because I think we all agree on the top 4. It's Russell, Bird, Havlicek, Cousy. Like, who's the 5th greatest Celtic? I always say it comes down to Paul Pierce or Tommy Heinsohn. Now, Garnett's a better player than both guys, but those guys played the bulk of their career, in Tommy Heinsohn's case, is an entire career with the Celtics, whereas Garnett was here for, 5 years? So that's where you get into, like,
right.
It gets
Jerry
a little
Rice
complicated.
isn't the greatest Seattle Seahawk to ever play.
Right. He's a 49er, from what I recall. Joe Montana is not the greatest Chief, although, he's the greatest quarterback to have played for the Chiefs. Maybe Patrick Mahomes will surpass him in 10 years. So that becomes complicated. She had to put LeBron on there because, he's trying to win another title. You don't want to piss him off. But I would say the top 5 would be Kareem, Magic, Kobe, Elgin Baylor, Jerry West. Because those guys played all of their career with the Lakers, with the exception of Kareem, who played 14 years with the Lakers after he left Milwaukee. That's the starting 5 for the Lakers. Now, Shaq was phenomenal, and LeBron's phenomenal, and, Wilt. I mean, talk about an organization that had every damn player.
Those were
we're not even bringing up James Worthy or Bob McAdoo technically played. Well, he played for the Lakers. Gail Goodrich is another, but Jerry West is one of the 5 guys. He's the logo of the league.
Yeah, so that omission upset a lot of Lakers fans, and it upset Jerry West.
Sure.
He was pissed off about it, and he typically not somebody to cause controversy or really speak out. He's never even really cared that the logo is him. In fact, I don't think he likes it. But this is what he had to say when he was talked about it. He was talking to Peter Vesey of where I don't know what outlet he's with now, but he's been covering the NBA for.
Peter's great. Love Peter Vesey.
A long time.
We had him on together when we were at the Herald.
We did.
Peter Vesey. I've known Peter Vesey for 40 years. He was always fantastic and very approachable.
This is what Jerry West had to say. He called it one of the most offensive things I've ever heard. I saw the other day Jeannie Buss made a statement, the 5 most important Lakers. One of the most offensive things I've heard in my life. I was there a lot of times, had a lot of success. I'd be curious to know if they would have had that success had I not been there. And I don't ever take credit for stuff. I don't. When I was around, maybe I was just a good luck charm. But I do know that when this thing fell apart, there were a lot of years where they weren't very good.
He's right. He's 100% right. He also, in addition to being one of the 15 greatest players in the history of the sport, is arguably the greatest executive in the history of the sport. Not just with the Lakers, right? With the Memphis and built a contending team, goes to Golden State and is a big part of constructing that team and recruiting Kevin Durant. Now he's with the Clippers, and he recruited Kawhi Leonard, got Paul George traded there. Like
everywhere he's gone, they've been good. Everywhere.
He's royalty. No, I mean, I think those are the 5 greatest Lakers ever in terms of playing their entire career with the Lakers. I mean, if LeBron plays 6 years with the Lakers and wins 3 titles, maybe we start to put him in there. And obviously Shaq won 3 titles as well. But when you think of the Lakers, really Magic is the first name that comes to mind for the Lakers. When I think Lakers, I think Magic more so than any. Now, I know more contemporary fans think of Kobe because, Magic hasn't played in 30 years and Kobe is more contemporary, more relevant at this point. Those would be the two guys, even more so than Kareem. Because, Kareem came from Milwaukee, and Kareem really didn't win until Magic showed up.
But
and then it was unbeatable.
Jerry West did it as a player and an executive.
And an executive. Yeah,
so
look,
twofold.
Okay, take Danny Ainge as a player and an executive with the Celtics and multiply it by 10. That's Jerry West concerning a player and an executive. Now, the first name that comes to mind when you think of the Celtics is not Danny Ainge. It's Bill Russell, Larry Bird, and go from there. As much as I love LeBron, Phil Jackson was a great coach, but no, they should not be top 5. But Jeannie Buss had to massage this in a few ways. First, she dated Phil Jackson, so I don't know if they still have a thing going on. And LeBron is current, so you don't want to piss him off by leaving him off this list. And LeBron's a student of the game. He's probably like, where the hell's Jerry West?
Yeah, I think that, with LeBron, it is silly. He's been there for, this is his third year there. Right. 1 year was terrible. Last year he won a title. This year, he's played in I don't know, 2/3 of the game.
2/3 of the games, yeah. About 2/3 of the games.
How are you gonna? I get the massaging thing. He's not. I don't think he would have been that offended if she'd put Jerry West on the list. Is he that sensitive?
No, I don't think so. He's not quite at the level of Aaron Rodgers. So I don't think he'd be as offended as Rodgers was when Green Bay drafted Jordan Love, traded up to draft for Jordan Love. So my two guys continue to dominate sports talk, both Aaron Rodgers and LeBron James. But no, Jerry West. And Elgin Baylor's the forgotten guy. For whatever reason, and I know he was an executive with the Clippers, and we always saw Elgin Baylor at the draft lottery, and the Clippers sucked the whole time he was general manager. But as a player, he was even better than Jerry West. And so he belongs on that list. And I think Magic, Kareem, and Kobe are no-brainers. And then I would put West and Baylor as 4 and 5. Pick an order.
I think considering that West, again, the twofold thing of being the guy who ran the organization and the player, you could argue is the most deserving. I know that the name brand and the players, he's not as good of a player as Kobe, and he's not as good of a player as Kareem or Magic.
He's not far behind them, though, Jet. That's the thing about Jerry West is not far behind Kobe. Like, I have Kobe as the 9th greatest player.
It's because he was blocked by
history.
Russell. I mean, these guys were all blocked by Russell.
The whole league was blocked by Russell. I mean, Jerry West was a better version of Steph Curry. Now, he couldn't quite shoot like Steph Curry. No one can. But Jerry West was also an elite defender. I mean, he was a great, great, great player. And so was Elgin Baylor.
That's what it comes down to. All these years later, it's still their legacy's impacted because freaking Bill Russell won every single title when they were players.
Exactly. And we see this in baseball, too. Like, I know, like, Willie Mays is now considered the greatest living ball player. I think Barry Bonds was a better player than Willie Mays. I don't dare get into that discussion on Twitter because every guy 65 years old and older who somehow knows how to use Twitter attacks me, and I don't even want to get into it. But the same thing happened kind of like with Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays. And Mantle, of course, died 25 years ago. And Mays is still alive and, is as tough as they come. At the time they were playing, they were considered pretty much equal. But as time's gone on, Mays' legacy has grown and Mantle's has diminished because the last image of Mantle was this old broken down guy who was playing first base and couldn't move. And by the way, the last image of Willie Mays is playing center field in the 73 World Series, getting hit in the head with the ball. But I always equate Mays and Mantle with Magic and Bird at his very best. I think Bird was superior to Magic, but in the totality, Magic gets the edge.
Yeah.
5-3 in championships, beat him 2 out of 3 times in the finals. I don't dismiss what happened in college, but Magic had a better team than Bird did. Talk about a guy pulling a bunch of crap to the championship was Larry Bird. It was like him, me, you, and 2 other people in the neighborhood. But I think as time's grown, Magic's legacy's grown and Bird's is kind of like diminished. It's like I saw them both play. I rate Magic slightly above him, but only slightly. Oftentimes when I put these lists out, I want to just maybe troll a little bit and say they're tied for being the 6th greatest player of all time. That's how close they were. But same thing with Mantle and Mays. As time's gone on, people are like, oh, Mays was much better than Mantle. Well, that wasn't the case when they were playing. It's
I
just the
think
way people think of them.
I think Sap, this just goes to show again that the Lakers organization, as an organization, they bumble around. It's not a strong organization. Like they lucked their way ass backwards into LeBron James. They did not do anything right. The only reason they won a title last year is because they had LeBron James.
Yep.
And the only reason he went there is because they're in LA, not because they're well run. Like Jeannie Buss, she's smarter than her brother, who's a freaking dope. But it's not like she's particularly good at this job either. I mean, this was silly.
This was silly. Yeah,
Phil Jackson.
No, that's stupid. Again, it's Jeannie Buss. She dated and lived with him. I don't know if they still got a thing going on. Maybe she didn't want to leave him out of it. But he was a coach. Like who thinks of a coach? I mean, even the Celtics with all their great tradition. Do you think of Red Auerbach before Bill Russell? No.
But it's also like, and now she's made a guy who's so closely tied with the Lakers. She's upset him. When did you ever hear him say anything like this?
Never. Again, this is like Russell Wilson complaining in Seattle, right? Like Russell Wilson was always go Hawks, and then all of a sudden, a few months ago, he was like complaining. And Russell
one of the most offensive things I've ever heard is what he said. One of the most offensive things I've ever heard.
Over the top. I mean, one of the most offensive things I've ever heard. We've heard more offensive things than that. But again, he's in his early 80s. This probably hurt him. He's a guy who's, he's probably sensitive to a lot of these things. And again, it didn't end well with LA. I have no idea why. I guess it goes back to your point, Chet, that the Lakers aren't a good organization. How the hell do you let Jerry West walk out the door?
He's dead on accurate. Right when he left, they started to be bad again.
Oh, God,
he actually knew how to run things, and they did not.
No, and you talk about Jeannie Buss and her brother. I mean, when Dr. Jerry Buss was running things, I think he was the best owner in sports. I mean, the Lakers were royalty, and they knew how to run things, and they made all the right moves. And, they'd make those smaller trades to get Michael Thompson as a backup center or add a Bob McAdoo and trade Norm Nixon when he was starting to go downhill and bring in Byron Scott. They knew how to make those moves. And again, they got the first pick in the draft. They traded Don Ford, if you've ever heard of him, Don Ford to the Detroit Pistons for a first-round pick.
Right?
Pretty much. That was John Ford, which is actually Martin Scorsese's favorite director. The Searchers is Martin Scorsese's favorite film.
I think that she has been elevated, Jeannie Buss, because her brother was so incompetent and a boob. Right. Her dad was obviously a great owner, and they won a championship, but it's not because of her. So she's a pretty woman, and I people know her because she's been around the team forever. But this was stupid, and I don't think that she's done anything to elevate the team.
No, I mean, again, got lucky with LeBron. So wherever LeBron went, if he went to the Nuggets in the summer of 2018, they probably would have won a title already and be favored to go back.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Then again, I mean, you put him on any team, they become instant contenders. The same thing with Tom Brady. Tom Brady goes to 7-9 Tampa, and I know everyone's saying, well, they were a loaded roster. Well, how loaded were they? They went 7-9. I mean, that's not a loaded roster. I know the quarterback threw 30 interceptions, which, Aaron Rodgers throws 30 interceptions in about a 5-year period. Jameis Winston did that in 1 year. But, let's give these all-time greats credit for not just being all-time greats as players, but they build that culture. And, because they're so focused and determined and so bought in that it trickles down to the entire organization. I've said this a million times. When Peyton Manning went to Denver, the moment he signed and walked in that building, they became contenders because Peyton Manning, demonstrated that. Same thing with Brady, same thing with LeBron James. When they show up, it's like, okay, we're serious. It was like the day the Patriots hired Bill Parcells back in 1993. When that happened, I was a big Patriots fan back then, and Parcells has always been one of my favorite coaches in league history. I got to meet him a few times, interview him. He was fantastic. What a personality. When they hired him, like, okay, they're going to be serious here. And, 3 years later, they're in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, when you hire people like that, you're going to succeed.
Yeah. So, I think that it was silly. And I think for someone who's been around the team Lakers for her whole life, it shows a kind of a fundamental lack of understanding of how things work there and how things were gotten successful.
Yeah. It just didn't end well for Jerry West in LA. And now he's with the Clippers, which is their, biggest rival, I guess. They share a building. Who's more
important to them winning those championships with Kobe and Shaq, Phil Jackson or Jerry West?
Well, here's the thing. That's an interesting question because Jerry West put that together and it didn't work till Phil Jackson showed up. I don't want to minimize Phil Jackson either. I mean,
I like doing that.
yeah, a lot of people do. He did win 11 championships, and I get it. He got to coach Jordan, Pippen, Shaq, and Kobe. God bless him. But, do you think Brad Stevens would have won 11 championships with those guys?
No, he would
Probably
have been
not,
a lottery.
because he would have had Grant Williams playing over Kobe Bryant in clutch time. But you get my point.
Luke Walton.
Yeah, Luke Walton. Well, exactly. You see Luke Walton to Frank Vogel. I mean, there's different levels of coaches, and I don't think Frank Vogel's a great coach, but I think he's a pretty damn good
Brad
coach.
Stevens would have loved Luke Walton as a player.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Rick Fox would have been one of his favorite players.
Rasha
guys like that.
Nesterovich, probably.
Yes. Well, another all-time favorite of his. So I think you got to give Phil Jackson some credit for all of that because he was able to be the perfect coach for that team. Phil Jackson wouldn't be the guy you want coaching your team like when he was running the Knicks. He never coached them, but he was a disaster there. He's the perfect guy to bring in with a lot of talent. Yeah, I mean, maybe Bruce Arians is that way in Tampa Bay. Give him this all-time great quarterback, and all of a sudden, he looks like a competent coach.
Yeah, so I think, listen, Phil Jackson, obviously, the 11 titles, it's hard to diminish him, even though I want to try. But, I mean, Jerry West pitched Shaq on coming to L.A., basically poached him from Orlando, and had one of the all-time heists in Vlade for Kobe trade.
How did Kobe last to the 13th pick in the first round?
Didn't scout high school well.
Yeah. I mean, Garnett was, what, 5th?
Yeah.
In his draft? So, yeah, it wasn't.
But it was, 6'11" as an 18-year-old. So Kobe wasn't, Kobe was a guard.
And Kobe was going to go to Duke, I believe.
Yeah.
That's where he was headed if he went to college.
And Garnett was going to go to South Carolina or something like that.
I think so, yeah. I mean, Garnett would be the guy that goes to like the surprise school and tries to win there because he's like a psycho. But I think that, I mean, Jerry West put the teams together, and then the final piece was getting Phil Jackson, and they started winning championships. And then I think Phil Jackson's coaching resume was really enhanced when he went back there and won the 2 titles with Kobe and Paul Gasol, who's not at the level of, obviously, Kobe, Shaq, Jordan, or Pippen, but to win back-to-back championships with those guys after having a falling out with Kobe Bryant, that shows a guy that, doesn't hold grudges, although apparently he does hold grudges, but it didn't appear that way with the Lakers because Phil Jackson's not stupid. When you get the opportunity to coach an all-time great like Kobe Bryant, you jump at that opportunity.
Yeah, I here's how I look at it, and right before we're going to wrap up in a second, but I look at it as I do think that there were a lot of other coaches that could have coached Kobe and Shaq to a title. I mean, they were that good. It appears to me that that Jerry West was maybe the only guy who correctly scouted Kobe Bryant.
Yes.
So I don't know that another GM would have made that move or been able to, because, I mean, listen, we laugh at it now. Vlade Divac was a good, very good player, high quality starting center in the NBA. I don't know that
he made
a lot
of couple
of
All-Star games, if I'm not mistaken. He was a starting center on a team that went to the finals in 1991.
Right. So I don't know. I think, being able to identify the player and then make that trade, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, Jerry West.
Absolutely. I like I've said a million times, he's the best executive in the history of the sport because he did it with multiple organizations in different eras. Right. And he adapted to the game. He really saw where the game was going, and he had a big part in what happened at Golden State. And then he goes to the Clippers, which, talk about a losing franchise.
Yeah, Memphis, too. It was a horrible
Memphis,
franchise.
he did a great job. I mean, the strangest thing was seeing Jerry West as the GM and Hubie Brown as the coach, and they were damn good. They played tough basketball. I mean, Hubie Brown to me is an all-time great coach. He never won a championship. I don't even think he made it to an NBA Finals, but he was a guy who got the most, if not more, out of his players. And actually, I enjoyed listening to Hubie Brown on ESPN. I think he does a fantastic job for 87 years old.
Right. It's like, how do you build a competent team in freaking Memphis? And
not easy. Yeah, no, it's not easy at all. I mean, you got to get fortunate. Maybe they did a couple of years ago getting John Morant, but it's not exactly
not when he was there.
Destination. No,
they got Mike Conley, who's is not John Morant. He's a very nice player, and then they got Zach Randolph, and they got Marc Gasol in a good trade.
Yep.
They built it in a completely different way. But,
and they were tough.
He was slighted by Jeannie Buss and the
I don't blame
incompetent
him.
Lakers.
I do not blame him.
But that's going to do it for us today, Sap. We are going to be back on Monday with a fresh edition of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, where we're doing all of our year-end awards, first team through 12th team All-NBA. No, we'll just do the first couple of teams. And, maybe we'll come up with some of our own awards, just like the NBA came up with the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award. Maybe we can come up with a unique award.
I like that.
Sap Award, Sap, if you can think of anything. So make sure you listen to that show because it'll be a lot of fun on Monday. And then the rest of the week, we'll obviously be talking about the postseason as it begins. And we'll wrap up whatever happens here at the end of the regular season as well. So make sure you listen on Monday. That podcast will probably come out around 8:00, but I'll keep you guys posted, and you can find it. We'll tweet it out right when it comes out. At JohnSap25 is Sap's Twitter. At Jet Stryer is mine. We are presented by Full Press Coverage, and you can find our podcast wherever podcasts are found. Go download us on the iTunes store right on your phone. Make it nice and easy for yourself. Again, we're the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.